Hey guys, here is Book Club Codependent No More, Chapter 2, reaction video. Let's go.
Chapter 2. Other Stories. Ellen, an Al-Anon member, says, "When I say I'm codependent, I don't mean I'm a little bit codependent. I mean I'm really codependent. I don't marry men who stop for a few beers after work. I marry men who won't work." Maybe you identified with Jessica in the last chapter. Her story is an extreme example of codependency, but it's one I hear frequently. However, Jessica's experience is not the only type of codependency. There are as many variations of that story as there are codependents to tell them. Here are a few. Gerald, a handsome and personable man in his early 40s, calls himself a success in business but a failure in relationships with women. During high school and college, Gerald dated many women. He was popular and considered a good catch. However, after graduation, Gerald stunned his family and friends when he married Rita. Rita treated Gerald worse than any other woman he had dated. She acted cool and hostile toward Gerald and his friends, shared few interests with him, and didn't seem to care much for or about Gerald. 13 years later, the marriage ended in divorce when Gerald discovered some things he had suspected for years were true. Rita had been dating other men since they were married, and she was, and had been for some time, abusing alcohol and other drugs. Gerald was devastated. But after mourning for about 2 months, he fell wildly in love with another woman who was a start in the morning and drink till she passes out alcoholic. After spending several months worrying about her, trying to help her, trying to figure out what he was doing that caused her to drink, trying to control her drinking, and ultimately getting angry with her because she wouldn't stop drinking, Gerald terminated that relationship. Soon he met another woman, fell in love with her, and moved into her apartment. Within months, Gerald suspected she too.
So guys, I'm seeing a routine here that Gerald tends to go from relationship to relationship to relationship. As soon as one doesn't work out, he hops into another. He is what I like to call a relationship hopper.
Was chemically dependent. Soon, Gerald began spending much of his time worrying about his girlfriend. He checked up on her, rummaged through her purse looking for pills or other evidence, and questioned her about her activities. Sometimes he simply denied she had a problem. During those times, he kept busy, tried to enjoy his time with his girlfriend, although he said he felt uneasy, and told himself, "It's just me. Something's wrong with me." During one of the many crises in his most recent relationship, when Gerald...
Okay guys, here is one major mistake I'm noticing that Gerald is making, and our girl we just heard about, Jessie, in the last chapter. Now, what I'm realizing is they tend to blame themselves for their mate's issues. Now, their issues are not your fault. If you're with somebody that has a drinking problem or a drug problem, it's not your fault. It doesn't have shit to do with you. It's all about them. But I do know that we oftentimes do wonder if we're causing them to do the unhealthy behaviors.
Was temporarily jolted out of denial. He went to a chemical dependency counselor for advice. "I know I should end the relationship," Gerald said, "but I'm just not ready to let it go. We can talk about anything and everything together. We're such good friends. And I love her. Why? Why does this always happen to me? Give me a room full of women, and I'll fall in love with the one with the most problems, the one that will treat me the worst. Frankly, they're more of a challenge," Gerald confided. "If a woman treats me too well, it turns me off."
Oh, wow. So I've never heard of a man admitting to something like that. But often women do go for men just like their daddies. And if their dad treated their mom bad, so they may find a guy that will treat them just how their father treated their mother, whether it was wrong or correct. And it's funny that he has the same issue that I once had, where I would just constantly choose a bad guy because I was bored of the nice guys. So I find that very interesting. There's a man out there that does the same thing.
Gerald considered himself a social drinker who had never had problems as a result of his drinking. Gerald told the counselor he had never used drugs. Gerald's brother, now in his late 40s, had been an alcoholic since he was a teenager. Gerald denied that either of his deceased parents was an alcoholic, but reluctantly admitted his dad may have drunk too much. The counselor suggested the alcoholism and excessive drinking in Gerald's immediate family may still be affecting him and his relationships. How could their problems be affecting me? He asked. Dad has been dead for years, and I rarely see my brother. After a few counseling sessions, Gerald began to label himself codependent, but he wasn't sure exactly what that meant or what to do about it. When Gerald became less angry about the immediate problem in his relationship, he discontinued counseling. Gerald decided his girlfriend's problems with drugs weren't that bad. He became convinced his problems with women were due to bad luck. He said he hoped his luck would change someday. Is Gerald's problem bad luck? Or is it codependency? Beattie was in her mid-30s and had been married for 11 years when she sought help from a private therapist. She had 3 children, the youngest of whom had cerebral palsy. Beattie had devoted her life to being a good wife and mother. She told her therapist she loved her children, didn't regret her decision to stay home and raise them, but hated her daily routine. Before her marriage, she had many friends and hobbies, worked as a nurse, and was interested in the world around her. However, in the years following the birth of her children, particularly her handicapped child, she had lost her enthusiasm for life. She had few friends, had gained over 80 pounds, didn't know what she was feeling, and if she did, felt guilty for feeling that way. She explained she had tried to stay active by helping her friends and doing volunteer work for various organizations, but her efforts usually resulted in feelings of ineffectiveness and resentment. She thought about returning to work, but she didn't because all I know is nursing, and I'm sick of taking care of people. My family and friends think I'm a tower of strength, good old dependable Beattie, always there, always in control, always ready to help them. The truth is, Beattie said, I'm falling apart. Very quietly, but very certainly. I've been depressed for years. I can't shake it. I cry at the drop of a hat. I don't have any energy. I scream at the kids all the time. I don't have any interest in sex, at least not with my husband. I feel guilty all the time about everything. I even feel guilty about coming to see you, she told the counselor. I should be able to solve my own problems. I should be able to just snap out of this. It's ridiculous to waste your time and my husband's money for my problems. Problems I'm probably imagining and blowing way out of proportion. But I had to do something, Beattie confessed. Lately, I've been thinking about suicide. Of course, she added, I'd never actually kill myself. Too many people need me. Too many people depend on me. I'd be letting them down. But I'm worried. I'm scared. The counselor learned Beattie and her husband had children, the youngest with cerebral palsy. Beattie also said before their marriage, her husband had problems with alcohol. During their marriage, he had drank less, had held the same job, and had been a good provider. But upon questioning, Patty told the counselor her husband had not attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings or any other support group. Instead, he went on the wagon for months between weekend drinking binges. When he drank, he acted crazy. When he wasn't drinking, he was angry and hostile. I don't know what's happened to him. He's not the man I married. What's even more frightening is I don't know what's happening to me or who I am, Patty said. It's difficult to explain exactly what the problem is. I don't understand it myself. There's no major problem I can point to and say, that's what's wrong. But it feels like I've lost myself. At times, I wonder if I'm going crazy. What's wrong with me? Patty asked. Maybe your husband is an alcoholic and your problems are caused by the family disease of alcoholism, the counselor suggested. How could that be? Patty asked. My husband doesn't drink that often. The counselor dug into Patty's background. Patty talked with fondness about her parents and her 2 adult brothers. She came from a good family that was close and successful. The counselor dug deeper. Patty mentioned her father had attended Alcoholics Anonymous since she was a teenager. Dad sobered up when I was in high school, she said. I really love him and I'm proud of him. But his drinking years were some pretty crazy years for our family. Not only was Patty married to someone who was probably an alcoholic, she is what is now called an adult child of an alcoholic. The entire family had been affected by the family disease of alcoholism. Her dad stopped drinking. Her mother went to Al-Anon. Family life improved. But Patty, too, had been affected. Was she expected to magically overcome the ways she had been affected just because the drinking stopped? Instead of additional counseling sessions, Patty's counselor referred Patty to a self-esteem course and an assertiveness class. The counselor also recommended Patty attend Al-Anon Adult Children of Alcoholics meetings, which are self-help groups based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Patty followed the counselor's advice. She didn't find an overnight cure, but as the months passed, she found herself making decisions with greater ease, feeling and expressing her feelings, saying what she thought, paying attention to her needs, and feeling less guilty. She became more tolerant of herself and her daily routine. Gradually, her depression lifted. She cried less and laughed more. Her energy and enthusiasm for life returned. Incidentally, with no prodding from Patty, her husband joined Alcoholics Anonymous. He became less hostile, and their marriage began to improve. The point here is Patty gained control of her life. Her life started working. Now, if you ask Patty what her problem is or was, she will answer, I'm codependent. Clients who seek help from mental health and chemical dependency agencies are not the only people who suffer from codependency. Randall was a chemical dependency counselor and a recovering alcoholic with several years of sobriety when he found himself having troubles. Randall was also an adult child of an alcoholic. His father and 3 brothers were alcoholics. An intelligent, sensitive man who enjoyed his work, Randall's problem was his leisure time. He spent most of it worrying about, obsessed with, other people and their problems. Sometimes he tried to untangle messes alcoholics created. Other times he felt angry with the alcoholics for creating the messes he felt obligated to clean up. Sometimes he felt upset because people, not necessarily alcoholics, behaved in particular ways. He ranted, felt guilty, sorry, and used by people. Rarely, however, did he feel close to them. Rarely did he have fun. For many years, Randall believed his duty was to worry about people and get involved in their problems.
In case you guys are wondering what I'm doing, instead of me continuously pausing, I'm making notes to remind myself what to discuss in the reaction after the chapter is done being read. And I'm also going to start, just while I'm saying it, so you guys know, I'm also going to start doing a basically a book book club about my journey through my spirituality. I am trying to see what I believe is the correct and real one whole religion we're supposed to be living by, which I'll go over in that video. But I will go over notes and things I studied in the first video, and then we will read, we'll have a book club reaction video like this. Just maybe me leading by example can help you guys in your own spiritual journeys. So, and you guys can follow me on mine. So I figured that'd be an exciting thing to do together. And then I'm thinking of having another book club of a for fun book, an interesting like mystery novel or something. Ooh, maybe a James Patterson. I don't know. We'll see. But this is kind of fun. I kind of like it. It's kind of different. I never really noticed anybody doing reaction videos on Audibles. So, yeah, I like it. Maybe on one of them, because I only have like so many books, so maybe on one of them we'll do like, I'll read to you guys, so you can kind of do it that way, so you can see how interesting I can be when I'm reading a book. I get very enthusiastic, but let's get back to this book. I've rambled enough.
Called his behavior kindness, concern, love, and sometimes righteous indignation. Now, after getting help for his problem, he calls it codependency. Sometimes codependent behavior becomes inextricably entangled with being a good wife, mother, husband, brother, or Christian. Now in her 40s, Marlis is an attractive woman when she takes care of herself. Most of the time, however, she's busy taking care of her 5 children and her husband, who is a recovering alcoholic. She devoted her life to making them happy, but she didn't succeed. Usually, she feels angry and unappreciated for her efforts, and her family feels angry at her. She has sex with her husband whenever he wants, regardless of how she feels. She spends too much of the family's budget on toys and clothing for the children, whatever they want.
All right, I just want to save that place so that I can make a little note. Okay.
She chauffeurs, reads to, cooks for, cleans for, cuddles and coddles those around her, but nobody gives to her. Most of the time, they don't even say thank you. Marlis resents her constant giving to people in her life. She resents how her family and their needs control her life. She chose nursing as her profession, and she often resents that. But I feel guilty when I don't do what's asked of me. I feel guilty when I don't live up to my standards for a wife and mother. I feel guilty when I don't live up to other people's standards for me. I just plain feel guilty, she said. In fact, she added, I schedule my day, my priorities, according to guilt. Does endlessly taking care of other people, resenting it, and expecting nothing in return mean Marlis is a good wife and mother? Or could it mean Marlis is codependent? Alcoholism, or chemical dependency, is not the only family problem that can create a codependent person. Alyssa, the mother of 2 teenagers, worked part-time at a mental health organization when she went to a family counselor. She had previously gone to many family counselors in her search for help. She went to counseling because her oldest child, a 14-year-old boy, was constantly causing problems. He ran away, broke curfew, skipped school, disobeyed other family rules, and generally did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. This child, Alyssa told the counselor, is driving me crazy. She meant it. She was worried sick. Some days, she was so depressed and troubled she couldn't get out of bed. Alyssa had tried everything she could think of to help this child. She'd placed him in treatment 3 times, put him in 2 different foster homes, and dragged the whole family from counselor to counselor. Alyssa had tried other techniques, too. She had threatened, cried, hollered, and begged. She had gotten tough and called the police on him. She had tried gentleness and forgiveness. She even tried acting like he hadn't done the inappropriate things he had done. She had locked him out, and she had traveled halfway across the state to bring him home after he ran away. Although her efforts hadn't helped her child, Alyssa was obsessed with finding and doing the one thing that would make him see the errors of his ways and help him change. Why, she asked the counselor, is he doing this to me? He's running and ruining my life. The counselor agreed the problem with Alyssa's son was painful, upsetting, and the problem didn't have to run and ruin Alyssa's life. You haven't been able to control your son, but you can gain control of yourself, he said. You can deal with your own codependency. Cheryl also labels herself codependent. Shortly after marrying the man of her dreams, she found herself in a nightmare. Her husband, she learned, was a sex addict. In his case, that meant he couldn't control his urges to indulge in pornography. He was compulsively drawn into affairs with other women, and, as Cheryl put it, God only knows what and who else. She learned her husband was a sex addict 1 week after their wedding, when she discovered him in bed with another woman. Cheryl's first response was panic. Then she got angry. Then she felt concern for her husband and his problem. Her friends advised her to leave him, but she decided to stay in the marriage. He needed help. He needed her. Maybe he would change. Besides, she wasn't ready to lose her dream of that rosy future they would have together. Her husband joined Sex Addicts Anonymous, a 12-step self-help group similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. Cheryl refused to join COSA, similar to Al-Anon, for family members of sex addicts. She didn't want to go public with her problem. She didn't even want to discuss it privately. Over a period of months, Cheryl, a successful fashion model, found herself accepting fewer work assignments, turning down evenings out with friends, and sticking closer to home. She wanted to answer the telephone in case women called for her husband. She wanted to be home to see her husband when he left the house and returned. She wanted to see what he looked like, how he acted, and how he talked. She wanted to know exactly what he was doing and with whom he was doing it. She often called his SA sponsor to complain, to report, and to inquire about her husband's progress. She refused, she said, to be tricked and deceived again. Gradually, she alienated herself from her friends and activities.
Okay, so the thought that I had, because it's such an overpowering, heartbreaking thing, is that my last relationship I damaged by being codependent because of numerous reasons. I was codependent because I had been cheated on. I was codependent because I was abused. I was codependent from being around alcoholics all my life. I was feeling just very out of control and craving that control, and I really believe that's what codependency is when you're hurt by something that makes you feel like you have no control over your life, and so you're trying to control others through their problems and making it about them, when really you're the one with the problem because you feel so out of control. It's like anorexic and bulimic. They, try to control what goes in and out of their bodies because they have no control anywhere else in their life. That's a big deal. That's just a big point I wanted to mention.
She was too worried to work. She was too ashamed to talk to her friends. Her husband had several more affairs. Her friends were frustrated with her for staying with him and constantly whining about how terrible it was to be his wife. I couldn't stand the sight of my husband. I had nothing but contempt for him. Yet I couldn't bring myself to leave him, Cheryl reported later. I couldn't make myself do much of anything except worry and check up on him. My turning point was the night I chased him with a butcher knife, Cheryl said. It was my lowest point. I was running through the house, screaming and raving, when I suddenly became aware, for the first time, of me. I had gone mad. I was crazy, completely out of control, and he just stood there, calmly looking at me. I knew then I had to do something to get help for me. Cheryl joined COSA shortly after that incident. It was at those meetings that she began to label herself and her loss of control as codependency. Cheryl is now separated from her husband and seeking a divorce. She is also feeling better about herself. Although the preceding examples have been dramatic, codependency doesn't necessarily have to be so intense, and it doesn't always involve experiences with deeply troubled people. Kristen is married, has 2 young children, and knows of no alcoholism or compulsive disorders in her immediate or extended family. Yet she calls herself codependent. Her problem, she says, is that other people's moods control her emotions. She, in turn, tries to control their...
And that's where she's wrong, is that she allows them, their moods and everything to control her emotions. It doesn't just automatically control it.
feelings. If my husband is happy and I feel responsible for that, then I'm happy. If he's upset, I feel responsible for that too. I'm anxious, uncomfortable, and upset until he feels better. I try to make him feel better. I feel guilty if I can't, and he gets angry with me for trying. And it's not only with him that I behave codependently, she added. It's with everyone. My parents, my children, guests in my home. Somehow, I just seem to lose myself in other people. I get enmeshed in them. I'd like to do something about it, this thing called codependency, before it gets any worse. I'm not terribly unhappy, she said, but I'd like to learn how to relax and start enjoying myself and other people. A minister summarized the condition this way. Some people are really codependent, and some of us are just a little bit codependent. I chose the preceding examples because they're interesting and represent a variety of experiences. They also illuminate a point that needs to be made. No single example illustrates the typical codependent or his or her experience. Codependency is complex. People are complex. Each person is unique, and each person's situation is different. Some people have extremely painful and debilitating experiences with codependency. Others don't, and may be only mildly affected. Sometimes codependency is a person's response to another person's alcoholism. Sometimes it isn't. Each codependent has a unique experience born from his or her circumstances, history, and personality. Yet, a common thread runs through all stories of codependency. It involves our responses and reactions to people around us. It involves our relationships with other people, whether they are alcoholics, gamblers, sex addicts, overeaters, or normal people. Codependency involves the effects these people have on us and how we, in turn, try to affect them. As Al-Anon members say, identify, don't compare. Activity. Number 1. Did you identify with any people in this chapter? What helped you think of yourself? Which relationships did it bring to mind? Why? Number 2. You might find it helpful to buy a large notebook and record your responses to these activities. You can also write down other thoughts and feelings you have as you read this book.
We already are. All right. So, y'all, let me pull up my notes that I did on her. Chapter 2. All right, now, so for Gerald's story, I found it interesting that good women bored him. I found that it was very interesting. Hold on, trying to make it bigger. Oh, my bad, guys. But I found it interesting that he surrounded himself with alcoholics all his life and convinced him that he could just deal with his girlfriend's drinking issues. Then we came to Patty's story, and it was funny, she was never interested in sex if it was with her husband. So that means she was interested in sex with other men. Her husband was good until he did binges. And yeah, I've been with guys who did binges. Didn't just drink all the time, but binge drank every weekend. Binge drank, or once a month. Binge drank, and when they drank, it was bad. Now, let's see. And I did notice that he got help once he saw her get help. So it's kind of like lead by example. I notice that a lot of these people are unhappy and do not know why. Codependency is mostly common when you experience someone you love being an alcoholic. Does this only affect people who experience an alcoholic? Although they do mention substance use in general. And then I noticed she did say other stories that made me understand that maybe it's just when you feel out of control, it develops codependency, and codependency is the need for controlling others, clearly, as we're seeing in these examples. And then I found it interesting in Marla's story. She said she has sex with her husband whenever he wants, no matter how she feels. I've been there too, and I know the reason she's doing it is to guarantee herself he'll never cheat on her. So that's not trusting your spouse, and that's not having a good relationship. That's still control. That is still a form of control. Now, the one with the sex addict husband, that was really sad. I've been with a sex addict. It can completely tear your world apart, and it's like they have to cheat. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just going to happen. You just have to be okay with it, or you got to leave them. And it's not going to make any difference to them because they're still going to be out there fucking. Excuse my language. I know this is YouTube. Then that was where my notes pretty much stopped. I do find it interesting that it is a controlled disease. And my mom was I was very controlled as a child. Both my parents both had controlling ways, I guess I could say. Controlling tendencies. The real controller was my father. I love my parents very much, don't get me wrong, and a lot of you out there might think I'm just telling my business, but I'm not telling nobody business. I'm not telling personal family shit. I'm not saying names. I'm just saying I've experienced these things. It is my truth to tell. So if any of my family members happen to see this, please keep that in mind. I will see you guys tomorrow for Chapter 3 of Codependency No More. You have a great night.